Welcome back to KXLU 88.9 FM Los Angeles. You're listening to A Fistful of Vinyl with Alec and John. It's, I haven't learned to read analog yet, but it's Monday morning, and we have a guest here with us.
What's up?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Shakey Graves from Austin, Texas.
Shakey Graves.
Graves.
Now, we've been obnoxiously hitting social media about this for about the last week and a half. And for two people who are like pretty bad at social media, that's like kind of a feat. 3, I guess. This is a whole room with bad social media. I just figured out the @ thing on Twitter. It's like,
congratulations.
I know, it was like such a big milestone for me.
That's a kick-ass day.
It's just like, man, I'll always remember like my first kiss, like my first car crash, and the day I learned what that little snail meant on Twitter. But anyway, we got Shakey Graves here from Austin, Texas. He just killed it last night at the Bootleg Bar, for anyone who was out there. And for anyone who wasn't, he'll be playing for us today. Mm-hmm. So I figured, I don't know, let's, let the listeners get to know you a little bit,
Yeah.
So tell us.
I think the first thing, so I saw an interview, a video of you recently, the Late July video where you talk about your name, how you got it. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think it's a pretty rad story.
Yeah, sure. I started going by Shakey Graves. I mean, actually, originally I had started to think about using another name when I actually lived out here. I lived in LA. I lived off of Kingsley in this cardboard tube of an apartment that was just absurd, man. It was just a fake apartment. And I had been writing my own music for a long time and started to manipulate tape a lot and sound different than just like me and a guitar. Uh-huh. And I had originally read this interview with, I think it was like a story about Jeff Buckley that like right after he had released Grace, he went from like 0 to 100 to where he was just kind of playing coffee shops and total unknown guy, and then people were like, come on man, like you're amazing, we love this. and he got he like missed the small intimate thing, so he went on something, he called it something like the Ghost Coffee Shop Tour, and he took this tour through the US and he played as a different name every night. And I read this like long list of these just totally ridiculous, like Fairy Bop Night, like Demo Man, just all these crazy
great
names.
film.
And Demo Man, wonderful film. But it made sense. I was like, that would be pretty rad. I guess the music speaks for itself in that point. Like it doesn't matter if you're seeing Jeff Buckley or Possessed by Fairies or whatever it's called. If it sounds really good, it should sound really good. Yeah. And then so I had like thought that over. I'll have a name. Someday I'll have a cool name. It'll come.
When you get famous enough to have to change your name.
Which is what I have, because you don't want to call yourself like King Buttercup and then kind of get out. It's like getting a tattoo that you're going to have to just live with.
Yeah, forever.
And
like, you're probably going to be my girlfriend for a long time.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll get your name on my ass.
Cindy's Candy. You change it, black it out. But yeah, then I went to a music festival that's outside of Austin called Old Settlers Music Festival, and I was living here at the time and flew back and didn't tell anyone besides my best friend that I was going back to Austin. I was like, I'm just gonna show up for the weekend. We're just gonna go camping. You're gonna pick me up from the airport. So he picked me up from the airport, drove me out city limits, put me in the trunk of his car so we could sneak in without me having a wristband. And we proceeded to have one of those like magical weekends where somehow you can drink all weekend and no one gets in a fist fight or like no one acted crazy and no one felt bad. And we kind of went on these it was like 4-hour sleeping shifts. So we had like nocturnal day and daytime day. And anyway, at one point in this awesome weekend, this guy came up to us, and I think he was on acid probably. And he was just super stoked on everything. Hey man, what's the deal? What's the scoop? Scoop. Oh yeah, zip that. Blah, blah, blah. Just going off on it, and he had like a big warm 24-ounce beer. And he's like, this whiskey's doing me so good, man. This is so good. And we're like, it looks like great whiskey. He's like, it's super good whiskey.
Never heard of that brand.
Yeah, you want to try? You want to try the whiskey? We're like, oh yeah, like fake drinking it. He's like, oh, that's amazing whiskey. I know my whiskey. And you know, as we finally like, okay, well, good luck. He's like, oh, spooky wagons. And we're like, did we just hear him say spooky wagons? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. And so we all kind of made up like fake campfire names for the people that were camping. And I was Shakey Graves, and my friend was Spooky Wagons, and his girlfriend was Spinster Jones. And then another friend of ours was Solomon Doors. And then Spooky Wagons' little brother was asleep in the tent, and so he didn't get a cool name. We just named him Droopy Wieners. Cooking hot dogs. We were like, let's just name him Droopy Wieners. He woke up.
He deserves it.
That's what he gets for falling asleep, man. That's
still
like,
cursed by that to this day. I see him, and I'm like, people are asking about you.
it's like Music Fest 101.
I know.
Don't fall asleep when there are hot dogs being
Don't fall asleep
cooked.
when you're getting cool Indian guide names.
It's like top of the list, man.
Yeah, you'll get in trouble.
Man, and that's like the best way to get into a music fest too. It's like, oh, I figured out a way in without paying.
Yeah, trunk of a car.
Man, I actually I made Warped Tour passes one year. Like,
Made them?
yeah, like
You counterfeited Warped Tour passes?
printed them out, went to Kinko's, laminated them.
You're like, I'm going to see Blink-182 if it kills me.
So many times.
Sum 41, you haven't
Sum
been relevant
41.
for so long, but I'm here and let's do this.
Let's do this, man.
In too deep. Wait, that song.
Man,
I jumped a fence into a music festival. I've never counterfeited anything that cool before.
no, well, I mean, come on.
Just escape into the crowd.
Yeah, I
You'll
just
never know who I
slipped
am.
in,
It like
disguised myself.
it really satisfied that like that heist desire that every, you know, I assume like every male has. Just, you know, they see the movie Heat and they're like, oh my god, like
Yes.
I need to rob a bank.
Yeah,
All right, I'm gonna
in a
call my 3
tuxedo.
best friends. We need assault rifles and we need cool masks.
Yeah, that was
and a getaway car.
that was the thing. Like once I was in, you know, I was aware that I was like I snuck in.
You're on the
prison
lam at that point,
to bust
yeah.
someone out or something like that.
You're like
I'm
undercover.
if I leave, I can never get back in. So I was just trapped in this little ecosystem for the weekend.
Man, that's awesome. Well, we picked out some music. Now, for anyone familiar with the process, you and I have been trying to make this happen for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And it fell through a couple times, but like you're here now, and like we're so stoked. But the last time we talked, you had sent me a list of bands that were I guess like, you know, like are kind of contemporaries to you, or bands that you felt like deserved more recognition than they were getting.
Yeah, I forget that was a long time ago.
That was a long
a
time
year
ago.
maybe.
So some of these bands maybe have gotten the recognition they deserve since then. But we've got first up, we've got the Act Rights.
Oh sweet, yeah.
We've got Wild Child. We've got Hello Wheels. We've got Due Diligence.
Whoa.
We've got Whiskey Shivers.
Yeah.
And we've got Bedbugs. No, sorry. Freshwater Indians. Crooked Cowboy and the
Crooked
Freshwater
Cowboy,
Indians.
yeah.
With the song Bedbugs.
That's what's up.
So we're going to play some of this, and then maybe afterwards we can like reflect on it and talk about other cool, silly things.
Sounds ideal.
You're listening to A Fistful of Vinyl on KXLU. Get at us on Facebook, facebook.com/A Fistful of Vinyl, or call in 310-338-5958, 310-338-KXLU. Welcome back to A Fistful of Vinyl, KXLU 88.9 FM, Los Angeles. You're listening to Alec and John. Our guest today, Shakey Graves from Austin, Texas. Shakey? Yo. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about...
Chilling.
one of the things that I wanted to talk about, well, you know, kind of going back to this notion that, like, you know, when we started talking about you coming on the show, it was, you know, from a very different era, it seems like, in, you know, Shakey Graves history, yeah? Because, like, it seems like you, from my observation, it seems like you kind of broke after our first conversation, and then, yeah?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. And I was kind of thinking if you could, you know, like sort of like address that process of going from, you know, somebody who's I guess like completely self-fueled at that point, I would imagine, and going to, you know, having like all this attention, and maybe, yeah, we have a lot of like potential artists who listen to our show, and maybe, you know, shed some advice, shed some light on them as far as your own personal experiences go.
I mean, I think you know, one of the main indicators, I guess, that I had music that I was confident in sharing with other people is that I ended up making music that I could listen to myself without it sounding like I was listening to me, like without nitpicking and being like, oh, my voice is, you know, like blah blah blah. And in the recordings that I've made, I kind of ambitiously went in that direction pretty hard, you know, to sing in a way that wasn't my like my me voice somehow. It felt like it was music from a different place, so that again, when I listened to it, I almost had no connection to it, and it felt like a new song. And then I spent a long time learning that music. Like, I would record stuff that I just couldn't play live, or even really play all the way through, and then over a matter of time, I would learn to play that song that I had written, But I would just stick to your guns, like when I was living out here, the main thing was just finding good rooms. And I went from playing at like the Whistling Pig off of a Craigslist ad, to within like a year's time, I found a community. I used to play in this warehouse over off of Santa Fe called 2023 that was like a speakeasy. And it was up in this old garment factory, and it was run by a close friend of mine named Tommy. And that was like, once I found that place, almost all of 2009, that was like where I played the majority of my shows. I didn't play out really, except for maybe the Silver Lake Lounge a little bit and stuff like that. But what it was just a room of people who were willing to listen to me yell at them while playing acoustic guitar, and they'd be like really closely paying attention, which allowed me to kind of get closer to the chest and I don't know, really feel out my music. But I've been playing the same songs and finding new parts in them for like 3 years. So I don't know. I'd say draw on your influences when you got them, because when I was out here, I was pretty stranded and disassociated from everybody, and I was just kind of waiting for the phone to ring. And that was where a lot of my mentality and a lot of the better music that I feel like I've written came from. And I feel like if you've moved out here from another place or whatever, it's really easy to feel stranded. But I think it's like an important solitary confinement kind of deal. Like bad apartment, distant girlfriend,
Sort of the immersion therapy cocktail.
Yeah, sort of. I'm not saying like run off in the mountains and make yourself lonesome, but LA is just as void of contact sometimes as the mountains are, I guess.
Yeah.
So would you say that some of the environment has had an effect on the way that you've done songwriting? Oh
man, like California, LA specifically has had more of an effect on my songwriting than almost anything, like without doing my time here.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't have anything to fall back on or any reference point, like I'm like, and the only thing that really gave me the confidence even to go back home to Austin eventually and be like, I can do this, is that I could fight. I figured out finally how to fight people's attention my way, in a city like LA, which can be really hard. And even if it was like 25 people, I'm like, if I can get these 25 people to pay attention to me for like 5 minutes, I can get some people in Austin, Texas to pay attention to me for 45 minutes.
Yeah, right. It seems like that's been a part of your process. Another interview I read with you, you said something about how at first you struggled with trying to get the audience to pay attention to you. And in the show last night, I mean, that seems to be something that's like pretty well calculated on your end at this point. The way that you like slow songs down and then speed them back up to sort of like keep interest.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? Like, what was that process?
Well, that
like?
just took like market testing is what it felt like,
Yeah.
I basically, because one of the last shows I had out here was at this Irish pub like in downtown. I can't remember what it's called. And I was basically just a house opening act for 2 months. And I opened for this guy named Lightning Bill Woodcock every Wednesday for like a month. And Lightning Bill Woodcock has these crazy kind of ZZ Top sounding songs that are all about like going down on women and just ludicrous, just absolutely gnarly lyrics. And he has these like,
Truly revolutionary, that one.
And he's like a really nice, like totally down to earth guy. And then his like stage persona is Lightning Bill Woodcock, and he's got this crazy like facial hair and licks his guitar and like, and so every Wednesday or whatever, I would go down there and just try and hold my weight,
Yeah.
And try and make something that was worth listening to. And then when I went back to Austin, I basically did the same thing. I just went into like song jail and just would go and play bad crowds and try and get more and more people to actually sit and listen on purpose as opposed to just wasting that time.
Yeah, right. So you were talking about LA, And I know that you have a song about the city. Do you have any favorite Los Angeles songs? Like other songs that other artists have written that...
I think, honestly, I think Angelus by Elliott Smith is a pretty spot on song. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like in other places, no one really, or I've talked to people that, you know, jam Elliott Smith or whatever, and they're like, I didn't really put together that song's about Los Angeles at all.
Right.
I think the lyrics of it are crazy. Like, someone's always coming around here trailing some new kill. You're like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I came.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I followed the buzzards over here. He's like, something's dead. Where's the food? No food here.
Man.
Not for you.
No, find your food.
Oh, no.
So for some of our listeners who aren't entirely familiar with your music, talk about the setup that you have in here, because it's pretty unique. Not anything I've ever seen before.
Sure, yeah. The setup I have is it's a suitcase drum that a friend of mine developed for me, like in his high-tech garage,
laser cut
at his mom's house or whatever. And it's like an old Samsonite from the 80s, I guess. And then it's got a drum inside of it, and the drum head is exposed. And then there's a part that a tambourine clamps onto, and I play it with my heels, so it's like a boom chick noise. And then I play guitar and sing. And that, you know, that developed as much as anything.
Yeah.
And the drum was kind of a necessary element, because originally I was playing a kick drum and a hi-hat, and I don't think I had a car that could even fit that at that point. And so it really just became a logistical thing. Like, I had to borrow. I didn't own a kick drum either, so I would always borrow drums from whoever, and my sound was just really dependent on
like what kind of drum you could get.
Yeah, who was going to be generous to me, you know, like, please, can I disassemble your drum kit? And people are like, oh, God, okay.
This guy again.
This dude, disassemble, man. And eventually I got asked, because I used to play out here, this girl named Jody Osborne, I think is her last name. But she ran this blog called When You Awake.
Oh, yeah.
You know her?
She used to have that Free For All Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And so she was a promoter out here, and I used to do a lot of stuff with her. Or she saw me, she spotted me because I was wearing a big, cheesy 10-gallon cowboy hat in Silver Lake, and she was like, where's the cowboy hat going? And she followed me into Spaceland at the time, and I was playing this like awful opening slot. And she's like, I like that. I like country stuff. You're okay.
You're wearing a big enough hat for me.
Yeah, I like your hat mainly, and I'll throw you on some bills. But anyway, like she threw me on some great stuff, and when I moved back to Austin, she ended up being the official blogger for that Railroad Revival tour with Ed Sharp and Old Crow and Mumford & Sons. And she called me up and was like, what they do for every stop is they have like an official busker, like at the front gate, to kind of set the theme for railroads and homeless people or whatever the theme was. Yeah. And she's like, do you want to do it for the Austin stop? Sure. You know, like in my brain, I'm like, best gig ever. Played to thousands of people. And it was really just me like sitting at the front gate in the sun, playing to like a few people.
As they walk by.
You know, as they walk by, like, hey, cool, what's that? And so for that show, I got my friend to finally build this suitcase drum that I've been thinking about for a really long time. I'd like drawn pictures of it, and, you know, like, one day I'll own a car, third grade style. And but I finally had the impetus, and my buddy built it for me. And originally I sat down on it, but then it just evolved. It was like, one time I drank too many margaritas before a show, and my face got really hot, and I had a mental breakdown and was like, I am way too drunk to be playing music to people. And went on stage, and people were just like, go for it. And at some point I stood up and just like tried to play, and people were like, that's really cool. And I'm like, it feels cool. And they're like, it looks pretty cool too. I'm like, okay. And so then I started doing that on purpose. I was like, maybe I should stand up. It's a much more energetic show.
Yeah.
And then that like went on, you know, it's like weapons armor. And then that became like not a gimmick, you know, it ended up like actually changing the sound and the way that I would play my guitar and then the way I would sing. And then now it's like, it's kind of got its own weight to it now. It's sort of out of my hands a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of freaks me out.
How are your calves after a couple of years of this?
They're fine. My Achilles tendons are pretty bad. those are the ones that get super stressed out.
Yeah.
So now I have supple tendons because I'm old or something. I'm like, what?
And it'll be all the better.
Everybody's weakness.
Yeah. Sometime around the year like 2050, 26, you'll be sitting on a porch somewhere and telling stories about it. But I just don't have the tendons for it no more.
I got these robot drum legs. It's no problem. I can just wiggle a little bit. Yeah.
Man.
Pneumatic.
So I think we should get into some music.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Ready to perform.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna put on a buffer song in just a minute here. I'm so professional. I love this. We're gonna listen to some Recharge Melting while we set all this up, and then coming up in just a few minutes here, we're gonna have a live performance from Shakey Graves. Sick. You're listening to A Fistful of Vinyl on KXLU 88.9 FM Los Angeles.